It's some time since I did a video. Yeah, it must be probably 6 months or more than that. Okay, I thought I'd do perhaps one or two on when I was younger, what it was like growing up in the country a long time ago, because I'm quite old now. I was born in 1929 in the county of what was then Westmoreland. It's now part of Cumbria. I think it was in the 1970s that somebody decided it would be a good idea to change the county boundaries over. It was probably a political stunt to make one party more bigger, more powerful, better off than the other, I'm not sure. Anyway, Westmoreland went in with Cumberland and the Furness area of Lancashire, that's the sort of northwest corner of Lancashire, all went in to form Cumbria, which geographically, of course, makes more sense, because it means that all of that sort of Lake District lump that sticks out into the Irish Sea, that became all one county. I don't think my dad was keen on it, because he did building work. He was actually a joiner, wheelwright and undertaker, but he did a lot of building work. And if he wanted to get planning permission, he would go to see somebody that he knew in the county hall at Kendal and get it sorted. And then suddenly all that stuff was transferred to Carlisle or somewhere. And somebody he didn't even know was looking after it. But anyway, I suppose administratively it probably saved on staffing. Okay, so we lived in, our address was Tolbar Cottage, Home, Carnforth. And Carnforth was in Lancashire. And Carnforth's about 10 miles away. And Home, the village of Home, was about 3 or 4 miles away. So if anybody was trying to find us, half the time they didn't. Anyway, yeah, it was a mess, but that was what the GPO, the post office at the time, decided it would be, that's what it would be. So Tolbar Cottage, it's sort of what it says on the tin. In the 1800s or before that, it had been a toll. There'd been a bar, a gate across the road, so that anyone going through had to pay a toll. And I saw a sort of tenancy agreement from the 1800s once, and it was quite expensive. The tenancy, the rent was quite expensive, and I think the tenant had to keep the road in good repair on either side of the toll for so many miles, and then make sure that they got the money for any people, flocks of sheep, herds of cows, horses and carts going through. They probably kept a percentage of the money, I'm not sure. Not quite sure who looked after it, probably the government. I'm not sure that there were local authorities then. But anyway, probably the Lord of the Manor sorted it all out. So there were 6 of us in the family. And my dad had bought the place, I think, just before he got married. He got married in 1924. So, yeah, I think he bought it and then built an extension and that sort of thing. I've got a painting of the place that a friend of mine did, so which I'll show you another time. So, there were 6 of us. There was my dad, Arthur, my mother, Annie Elizabeth. Then there was Frank and Annie and Lillian and me, another Arthur. We all had just one first name. Not sure why that was. Perhaps we grew up disadvantaged. I don't know. I don't know why we only had one name. My mother had 2. There we are, that's what it was. Perhaps they thought it was a bit pretentious to have more than one. my mother had been married before she married my father. She'd been married to Charles Inman, and he died really when they'd been married only a couple of years, I think. And Frank was their son. Frank was about 5 years old, I think, when my mum and dad got married. So he had a different surname. He was called Inman, we were called Talon. But it didn't make any difference, we were all one family. And nobody seemed to take any notice of it. Now my dad was the local, he had his own business. He was a local joiner, wheelwright and undertaker. A joiner obviously does woodwork. There's a carpenter as well. I mean, they're all really the same, except strictly speaking, the carpenter does the sort of main framework of a house, while the joiner does the sort of bench work and the finishing off things in a building. He was also a wheelwright. He'd served his apprenticeship as a joiner and wheelwright, and so he made carts, barrows, gates, any sort of farm implements, and repaired farm equipment. And in fact, he had 3 brothers, and they were all blacksmiths. He'd started off as a blacksmith, and his father, my granddad, was a blacksmith, so it was in the family. I think he'd started off as an apprentice blacksmith, but I think he'd been helping to shoe a rather large horse, and he'd sort of had an argument with it or something. But anyway, he decided he wasn't really cut out for that sort of job, so he did a joinery apprenticeship. I remember him telling me that he went to one of the joiners who had a very good name for training apprenticeships, but this particular employer, joiner, he wanted £10 to sign him on, and my granddad wasn't prepared to pay that, so he had to go somewhere else. Anyway, he did an apprenticeship, and he could make cartwheels. And at the time that he was working in his workshop at Lupton, his brother, my Uncle Jack, had the smithy next door. And so that when the wheel was made, he would go round to the smithy and have a metal hoop, a tyre put on. And the idea was that you heated the metal hoop up till it expanded, and then you popped it onto the wheel, the wooden wheel, and threw water all over it so that it cooled down very quickly and created really tight joints in the sections of the wheel. All very exciting actually to see, and quite skilled to get it all right. Anyway, that's what my dad did. His hobby was keeping hens. He always called them hens. He never called them chickens. Everybody talks about chickens now, but chickens to him were the sort of yellow furry things that came out of eggs, hatched out of eggs. And grown-up chickens were hens. And so, but now everything's a chicken. Even the ones that are laying eggs are chickens. Perhaps it sounds a little bit, eating chicken is probably a bit better than eating hen. I think the same thing's happened with lamb as well. Nobody has mutton anymore, do they? It's always lamb. But that's the way of things, I suppose. Okay. Yes, my mother had been adopted as a small child. She was brought up by a Thompson family in Enmore, about not far over, 3 miles from where I lived. And we always thought that was her name, Annie Elizabeth Thompson. But when I looked on the 1901 census, there she was with the Thompson family, who already had about 8 or 9 children of their own. And there was Annie Elizabeth, not Thompson, but Annie Elizabeth Dawson, there as a adopted daughter. And also there was a Robert Dawson, 6 months old. So there we are. So my mother had a brother that she never mentioned, and we never knew anything about till I looked it up till I saw it on the 1901 census. So it's been quite exciting since then, just tracing out what happened to young Robert. But there we are. We'll leave that for another time. I've gone on far too long because I think people get so bored of listening to me that they don't get to the end. But there we are. I hope you've managed to keep with me, and we'll carry on a bit more next time.